When my father handed me that empty envelope, I didn't just lose my wedding. I lost the illusion of who he was. The morning light was soft, the kind that filters through curtains like forgiveness. I remember the smell of jasmine from the garland my aunt had just tied. The house buzzed with laughter and clinking bangles, my cousins darting between rooms with trays of sweets. It was supposed to be my happiest day, the day I'd finally walk down the aisle, the day my father would proudly give me away. But somewhere between the turmeric stains on my palms and the whispers of blessings, something inside me began to ache, a quiet, unexplainable ache. My name is Amelia, and this is the story of how I learned that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it wears the face that tucked you into bed. I grew up believing my father was my safest place. He was charming, full of stories about loyalty, sacrifice, and doing right by family. My mother passed away when I was 15, and since then, he had been my anchor, or so I thought. We lived in a modest, 2-story home in suburban Ohio, one of those neighborhoods where everyone waved from their porch, but no one really knew each other's business. Dad worked in insurance, reliable, steady, always punctual, like clockwork. When Ethan proposed to me, it was my father who cried first. Not me, not even Ethan. My little girl's getting married, he said, pulling me into his arms. His cologne, that same crisp cedar scent I associated with Sunday mornings and freshly ironed shirts, filled my lungs. He took charge of the wedding immediately. You just focus on being a bride, he'd said. I'll handle the finances, the planning, everything. It wasn't unusual. He'd always been the provider, the organizer, the man with a plan. I trusted him completely. So when friends and family began sending in money, gifts, and checks, those traditional blessings we politely accept in little white envelopes, I didn't think twice when he said, I'll take care of it all, sweetheart. You've got enough on your mind, and he smiled. That calm, confident smile I'd spent my life trusting. The weeks before the wedding were a blur of lace fittings and vendor calls. Ethan was gentle through it all, patient, kind, a little too organized for his own good. We were both dreamers, building a life in sketches and spreadsheets, but Dad, he seemed distracted. At first, I thought it was nerves. Maybe he missed Mom. Maybe the stress was getting to him. He started staying out late, saying he had work dinners. His phone never left his side. When I walked into his study one night, I noticed the faint scent of perfume, something floral and sharp. Not mine. I didn't think much of it. You don't look for betrayal in the people who raised you. 2 nights before the wedding, I came downstairs for a glass of water and found him sitting at the dining table alone. His glasses were off, his head in his hands. You okay, Dad? I asked softly. He startled, then smiled too quickly. Yeah, just tired, honey. Everything okay with the vendors? Perfect, he said, looking everywhere but at me. Everything's perfect. But his hand trembled when he reached for his coffee cup. The morning of my wedding, the sky was heartbreakingly beautiful. I still remember the sound of my veil rustling against the mirror as I adjusted it. My makeup artist hummed a love song. My best friend Lila peeked through the window and said, "The cars are here. You ready?" And I was ready for love, ready for life, ready to walk toward everything I'd ever dreamed of, until I wasn't. When I walked into the living room, Dad was standing near the fireplace, his suit perfectly pressed, his expression unreadable. Beside him was a small pile of envelopes, the ones guests had sent over the past few weeks. Before we go, I said cheerfully, let's put the gift envelopes somewhere safe at the venue. I'll have Ethan's sister, but he interrupted. About that. Something in his voice made me freeze. He looked smaller somehow, like a man shrinking under invisible weight. Dad? He swallowed hard. There's been a misunderstanding with the funds. My stomach tightened. What kind of misunderstanding? He rubbed his temple, the way he always did before saying something he didn't want to. Some of the money, most of it, really, it's gone. Gone. The word didn't even sound real. What do you mean, gone? I laughed nervously, waiting for him to laugh too. He didn't. I had expenses, debts. I stepped back, my veil brushing against the sofa. You mean you used it? The wedding money? He looked away. My father, the man who taught me that honesty was sacred, couldn't even meet my eyes. I'll fix it, he murmured. I'll get it back. How? When? My voice cracked. The wedding's today. When I pressed him. When I demanded the truth, the story came out, jagged, ugly, dripping with shame. There was another woman. He called her Cynthia. He said it like the name itself excused him. She was younger, vibrant, just a friend who needed help. The help had apparently included a lavish trip to the Bahamas, 5-star hotels, and shopping sprees, all paid for with the money meant for my wedding. My hands shook so violently I had to sit down. You gave my wedding money to your mistress, I whispered. He said nothing. Just the faintest tremor of guilt flickering across his face. In that silence, the entire scaffolding of my world collapsed. It's strange how time slows when your heart breaks. The laughter from the kitchen faded. The music in the distance felt far away. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. I remember staring at him, really seeing him, and realizing I didn't recognize this man. Not the man who walked me to school, not the man who'd promised to protect me, just a stranger with my father's face. I called off the ceremony that afternoon. The guests were confused. Whispers rippled through the hall. Ethan's family looked horrified. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't walk down that aisle pretending everything was okay, while the man who was supposed to give me away had already given me away for something cheaper. Ethan tried to reason with me. Bless his heart. We can still do this, he said softly. We don't need the gifts, the money. But it wasn't about money anymore. It was about trust. And in that moment I realized, if I could stand in a white dress, beside a man who loved me and still feel so utterly alone, then maybe the ceremony wasn't what made a marriage. Integrity did. I left. Not dramatically, not with screaming or tears, just quietly. I walked out of that hall, my heels clicking against the marble floor, my veil trailing behind me like the ghost of a dream. The sky outside had turned gray. It started to rain, soft, almost apologetic. I stood there, watching the raindrops blur my reflection in the car window, and I thought, this is what starting over looks like. Rain has a way of silencing things, cars, voices, even heartbreak. By the time I got home that evening, my dress was soaked through. The jasmine in my hair had wilted. The house, once full of laughter, was now a mausoleum of broken promises. Dad wasn't there. He'd vanished before I even left the hall. Maybe shame drove him away. Maybe he couldn't bear to see what he'd done. All I knew was that the silence he left behind was deafening. I remember taking off the veil and setting it on the kitchen table. The lace looked out of place among the bills and the half-empty coffee cup he'd left behind. The faint smell of his cologne still hung in the air, cedar and guilt. I sat there for hours, staring at nothing. The clock ticked past midnight before I realized I hadn't eaten, hadn't cried. My phone kept buzzing, Lila, Ethan, even my aunt, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Because what could I say? That my father had used my wedding money to buy affection from a stranger? That he'd sold my trust for a week in the sun? How do you tell people something like that without breaking? The next morning, I woke to sunlight, cruel, bright, and undeserved. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. My dress hung over the chair, its hem stiff from dried rainwater. When I walked past Dad's study, I saw the drawer half open, papers scattered, a photo frame face down. I picked it up. It was a picture of us on my high school graduation day. His arm around my shoulders, his smile wide and genuine. For a second, I wondered if that man still existed somewhere inside him. Then I saw the bank receipts. Withdrawals, hotel charges, transfers, all to the same name. Cynthia. Each line on the paper felt like a cut. I put them down gently, as if touching them too hard would make the betrayal worse. I didn't see him for 3 days. Ethan called, came by, even left groceries on the porch. He was kind in a way I didn't feel I deserved. "You don't have to talk," he said through the door one evening. "Just let me know you're okay." But I wasn't okay. I was angry, not at him, but at the version of myself that had trusted too easily, loved too blindly. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders, half-written thank you notes, floral centerpieces that never saw the aisle, shoes that still smelled of the bridal store, and yet, under the anger there was a strange calm, like the storm had already passed, and I was standing in the wreckage, deciding what was worth salvaging. On the 4th day, he came back. I heard his car before I saw him. The slow crunch of gravel, the soft slam of the door. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with something colder. Resignation. He knocked once, then again. "Amelia?" I opened the door. He looked older, not by years, but by guilt. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. He didn't bring flowers or excuses, just himself, empty-handed. "Can I come in?" I nodded, but my voice didn't follow. He sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd found him days before. I stayed standing. "I don't know what to say," he began. "Then don't," I said quietly. He rubbed his face with both hands. "I never meant for it to go that far. She made me feel young again. That line, 'She made me feel young again,' lodged in my chest like glass. So you used my future to relive your past?" He winced. "It wasn't like that." "It's exactly like that," I said, my voice trembling. "You took everything that was supposed to be sacred, Mom's memory, our family, my wedding, and you traded it for attention. For someone who doesn't even love you." He looked up at me then, and for the first time, I saw tears in his eyes. "You have every right to hate me," I shook my head. "I don't hate you, Dad. I just don't recognize you anymore." He tried to explain, about loneliness, about regret, about how he'd been weak. But weakness didn't steal wedding gifts. Weakness didn't lie for months. When he reached across the table, I pulled my hand back. "You always told me that integrity was the one thing no one could take from you," I said softly. "You didn't lose yours, Dad. You gave it away." His shoulders slumped. "I'll pay it back. Every cent. It's not about the money," I said. "It's about what it cost me to learn who you really are." After he left that day, something shifted. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a hollow kind of peace, the kind that comes when there's nothing left to lose. I started packing. The dress went into storage. The photos, too. I called the vendors, canceled the bookings, returned what I could. Everyone had questions, sympathy, gossip. I learned to say, "It didn't work out," and leave it at that. Ethan stopped by one last time. We talked for a long while, not as lovers, but as two people standing at the edge of something they couldn't fix. "I still love you," he said. "I know," I replied. "But right now I need to love myself more," he nodded. There were no tears, no promises, just quiet understanding. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them go. It took weeks before the small things felt normal again. Making coffee without shaking, sleeping without waking up in tears. But I began to find solace in the mundane. Morning walks, laundry, the rhythm of rebuilding. Lila became my anchor. She showed up every Sunday with croissants and stubborn optimism. "You're gonna rise out of this," she'd say, her mouth full of pastry. "Like some kind of phoenix bride." I laughed for the first time in weeks. It felt strange but good. Months passed. Seasons changed. I moved into a small apartment downtown. 1 bedroom, big windows, the kind of quiet that feels like a fresh start. Dad sent letters sometimes. Long, rambling apologies written in a shaky hand. I read them all, but I never replied. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means choosing not to carry the hurt anymore. One letter, though, stayed with me. It ended with, "I hope one day you'll remember me as I was before I forgot who I should have been." I didn't know if I could ever grant him that, but I understood the sentiment. Because deep down, I missed the father I'd had before the lies, the man who taught me how to ride a bike, who stayed up helping me with math homework, who danced with me in the kitchen when I was 12. I missed him, even if he no longer existed. One evening, I went for a walk near the lake. The sunset painted everything gold. I watched couples holding hands, children feeding ducks, and for the first time, I didn't feel bitter, just free. Maybe this was the lesson I was meant to learn, that love isn't proven through grand gestures or ceremonies, but through honesty, even when it's inconvenient. Because the truth, I realized, isn't meant to protect our pride. It's meant to set us free. And though I walked alone that day, it didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt honest. The thing about secrets is, they rarely stay buried. A few months after the wedding that wasn't, the truth began to seep out. First through whispers at family dinners, then through texts from distant relatives who just wanted to check in. I never said anything publicly, but people always sense when something's off. It started when one of my cousins, Maya, ran into Cynthia at a local cafe. Small town, smaller world. She was hard to miss. Blonde curls, designer bag, sunglasses indoors. Maya didn't mean to overhear, but apparently Cynthia was on the phone, talking loudly about that insurance man who promised her the world. My father. By the next morning, the story had made its rounds. In our family circle, gossip traveled faster than forgiveness. When my aunt called me, her tone was hesitant. "Amelia, sweetheart, is it true? About your father?" I paused. "Which part?" The woman, the money. Everyone's saying he did." The silence on the other end was long and heavy. Oh, my dear. And just like that, what I had tried to contain quietly became public shame. Not for me, though. For him. A week later, my father showed up at my new apartment. He looked different this time. Rumpled, thinner, like life itself had started to unravel him. "People are talking," he said softly, standing in the hallway like he didn't belong. "They'll get tired," I replied. "I didn't mean for this to hurt you, too." I leaned against the doorframe. "You didn't mean for a lot of things, Dad, but they still happened." He nodded. "I lost my job." I blinked. "What?" he sighed. "Company found out about the transactions. Misuse of funds. Even if it was personal, it looked bad. There it was. The full weight of consequence. He'd built his career on reputation, on being the dependable man in a suit. And now, all that was gone because of a few choices wrapped in lies. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I ruined everything." For a moment, the child in me wanted to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay. But I couldn't lie to either of us anymore. "You didn't ruin everything," I said quietly. "Just what you didn't respect enough to keep." He looked at me with that same pain I'd seen the day of the wedding, like he'd been trying to swim back to shore, only to realize he was the one who sank the boat. After he left, I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker. I thought about how easy it is for love to turn into pity if you're not careful. I didn't want to pity my father. I wanted to understand him. But understanding didn't mean excusing. That night I wrote him a letter. Not for him to read, but for me to let go. Dad, I used to believe that good people don't do bad things. Now I know that even good people can lose themselves. You taught me about integrity, and maybe losing yours was how I finally learned what it truly means. I forgive you, but I can't go back. I hope one day, when you look in the mirror, you'll see not the man who failed me, but the man who still has a chance to change. I folded it and kept it in my drawer. Some things don't need to be sent. They just need to be written. Time moved on, as it always does. Seasons blurred together. I found a small job at a local publishing firm, editing manuscripts and sipping too much coffee. I liked the quiet rhythm of it, the way stories helped me heal from my own. One afternoon, during lunch, a new intern asked, "You're Amelia, right? The one who almost got married last year?" I froze for a second, then smiled. "Almost, yeah," she hesitated. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay," I said. "Some stories just don't end the way we plan." And it was true. My life hadn't ended that day. It had simply rewritten itself. The real turning point came a year later. I was at a friend's small wedding. Nothing extravagant, just a backyard, fairy lights, the smell of rain on grass. During the ceremony, the bride's father walked her down the aisle. I felt a lump in my throat watching them, not from jealousy, but from peace. Because I realized I didn't need that moment anymore. I'd already walked myself down once. Alone, yes, but strong. After the ceremony, I stepped outside for air. A man approached, Ethan. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. He looked good, calmer. He smiled gently. "You look happy." "I am," I said honestly. He nodded. "I wanted to tell you, I'm engaged." For a second, I wasn't sure how I'd feel hearing that. But all I felt was warmth. "She's lucky," I said. He smiled. "No, I am." We talked for a while about nothing and everything, the weather, our jobs, life. There was no bitterness, no old pain, just closure. When he left, I realized something. Healing doesn't always roar like a victory. Sometimes it's quiet acceptance. That summer, I visited my father for the first time in over a year. He was living in a small rental apartment on the edge of town. The door creaked when he opened it. His hair had gone mostly gray. His hands trembled slightly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he stepped aside. "Come in, sweetheart." The apartment was simple. A few books, a photo of Mom on the shelf, and a plant that looked like it was surviving purely on hope. We sat in silence for a while, sipping tea. "I didn't think you'd ever come," he said quietly. "I didn't think I would either," I replied. He smiled faintly. "I quit drinking. Stopped seeing her." "I know," I said. "Aunt May told me." He looked down at his hands. "You know, I used to think the worst punishment was losing respect from others. But it's worse to lose it from your own child." That broke me a little. "Dad," I said softly, "you didn't just lose it. You can earn it back if you keep trying." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "You sound like your mother." We sat there for a long time. The kind of silence that feels like forgiveness, learning how to breathe again. Before I left, he handed me something, a small envelope. "I've been saving," he said. "It's not much, but it's for you, for whatever comes next." I opened it later that night. Inside was a note and a check. The note read, "This isn't to repay what I took, Amelia. It's to honor what I broke." I cried then, not for what he did, but for what he was trying to fix. The years since have been kinder. I built a life that feels simple and real. Morning light through thin curtains, books stacked beside my bed, friends who show up without needing a reason. Sometimes, when I pass by bridal shops, I still pause at the window, not with regret but gratitude, because I didn't lose my wedding that day. I found my truth, and if I ever do walk down an aisle again, it won't be for a show or a promise someone else arranged. It'll be for me, whole, honest, unafraid. People often ask me now, how did you forgive him? And the truth is, I didn't do it all at once. Forgiveness isn't a single decision. It's 1,000 tiny choices not to reopen the wound. Some days I succeeded, some days I didn't. But I kept trying, because holding on to anger started to feel like carrying his sin on my shoulders, and I didn't want that weight anymore. One morning, almost 3 years after the wedding, I found myself driving by the old church. It was early spring, the kind of morning where everything smells like rain and new beginnings. The gate was open, so I parked and walked inside. The hall was empty. Rows of wooden pews stood quietly, sunlight streaming through stained glass. I sat down, right in the middle, the same aisle I never walked. It was strange how peaceful it felt now. No bitterness, no ghosts, just a quiet sense of closure. I imagined what that day could have been. My father standing beside me, proud smile, eyes wet with love. Then I imagined the truth, the betrayal, the empty envelopes, the tears. And somehow, both versions existed in me at once. Grief and gratitude, side by side. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't erase what happened. It just teaches you to carry it differently. After visiting the church, I stopped by the nursing home where my father volunteered now. He'd told me about it in one of his recent letters, how helping the elderly kept him honest. When I walked into the common room, he was reading to a group of residents. He didn't see me at first. His voice was softer now, slower, but steady. The same rhythm he used when reading bedtime stories to me as a kid. When he finally looked up, he smiled. That small, unguarded smile I hadn't seen in years. "Amelia," he said. "Didn't expect you today," I shrugged. I was nearby. He nodded, not wanting to press. We sat outside afterward, on a bench facing the garden. The tulips were blooming, their colors wild and honest. He said quietly, "You know, I used to think redemption was something you earned by apologizing enough times. But it's not. It's what you build in the quiet after everyone stops watching." I looked at him, older, humbled, but still my father. "You're doing okay," I said softly. He smiled. "Better than I deserve." "Maybe," I said. "But better is still good." We sat there, side by side. Not father and daughter as we once were, but two people who had learned painfully that love doesn't always come wrapped in perfection. Sometimes it comes in the effort to rebuild what was broken. That night, as I drove home, I thought about the younger version of me. The girl in the soaked wedding dress, standing in the rain, terrified of starting over. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her, "You will be okay. You'll learn to stand taller without needing an arm to hold you. You'll build a life that's yours, not borrowed, not decorated by someone else's promises. And one day, you'll realize that walking alone down the aisle wasn't your tragedy. It was your triumph." Over the years, I started sharing my story, not for sympathy, but for connection. It began with small writing workshops, then guest talks at women's groups. I told them about betrayal, resilience, and the kind of healing that doesn't make headlines. One woman once asked me, "Would you ever trust again?" I smiled and said, "Yes, but this time I'll trust slowly, and I'll start with myself, because that was the lesson my father never taught me, that trust begins inward. If you can't trust your own strength, your own voice, your own boundaries, then anyone can walk through your heart like an unlocked door." A few months ago, something unexpected happened. I got engaged again, not to Ethan, but to someone I met years later, Daniel. A quiet man with kind eyes and an unshakable calm. We met at a community fundraiser where I was speaking. He listened more than he talked, and when he did talk, it was always honest, never embellished. On our first date, he asked me, "What's the most important thing you've learned about love?" I thought about it and said that it's not about promises. It's about consistency. He nodded, smiled, and said, "Then I'll try to be consistent." And he has been, every single day since. When we started planning our wedding, I insisted on one thing: no grand gestures, no expensive hall, no show. Just truth. We booked a small garden venue by the lake. 20 guests, wildflowers instead of roses, laughter instead of ceremony. My father came too. He didn't walk me down the aisle this time, but he stood up and gave a short, trembling speech. He said, "I once thought giving my daughter away would be my proudest moment. But watching her walk herself toward happiness, that's the real honor." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Not even mine. When he sat down, I squeezed his hand. "You made it right, Dad," he smiled. "No, sweetheart, you did." Now, years later, I sometimes think about how life rearranges itself when you least expect it. How pain can be both the ending and the beginning. My wedding day, the first one, was supposed to be the happiest of my life. It turned out to be the most honest instead, because that day taught me who I was when everything safe disappeared. It taught me that love without integrity is just decoration, that apologies without change are just noise, and that sometimes the people who break you are the same ones who show you how strong you really are. I don't regret it anymore. Not the canceled ceremony. Not the heartbreak. Not even the rain, because every drop of that storm watered the roots of the woman I became. A few weeks ago, my father sent me a card. It had no money inside this time, just a photograph. It was a picture of me and him at my second wedding, laughing mid-sentence. On the back, he'd written in shaky handwriting, "This time, your happiness was the only thing I wanted to buy." I keep that photo on my nightstand. It reminds me that redemption doesn't erase the past, it transforms it. So if you're listening to this, wondering whether you can ever forgive someone who betrayed you, I want to tell you this: you can, but only when you choose peace over pride. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what they did. It means remembering who you are despite it. And if you've ever had to walk alone, whether down an aisle, through heartbreak, or into a new beginning, know this: there is grace in that walk, strength in those steps, freedom in that silence. You don't need an audience to arrive at peace. You just need courage to keep walking. You know, when I look back now, I don't see that day as a tragedy anymore. It was the day life stripped away all the noise, the glitter, the expectations, the rehearsed smiles, and handed me something raw, something real, the truth. It's strange how pain, when it first comes, feels like punishment. But with time, it starts to feel like permission. Permission to change. Permission to choose differently. Permission to become someone braver than you were before. That's what my story really is. Not about betrayal, not even about forgiveness, but about becoming. Because when the people who are supposed to love you the most end up being the ones who hurt you deepest, you're left with two choices. You can break, or you can rebuild, and rebuilding isn't loud. It's not a grand announcement or a dramatic reinvention. It's quiet, a morning when you make coffee without crying, an afternoon when you laugh without guilt, a night when you finally sleep without replaying the hurt. Those small moments, they are the bricks of healing. My father and I still talk. Not as the man who ruined my wedding, but as two flawed souls learning to live with what's been done and what's been forgiven. There's no perfect ending, no cinematic closure, just real life, soft and steady. And sometimes that's enough. Because healing doesn't mean your story goes back to how it was. It means you find peace in how it's changed. If you've ever had your trust shattered by family, by love, by life itself, I want you to remember something. You are not broken beyond repair. You are the story that keeps rewriting itself in strength. You are the quiet comeback no one saw coming. and you don't need anyone to hand you your worth. It was never theirs to give in the first place, so maybe your aisle isn't lined with flowers. Maybe it's just you, walking forward, trembling a little, but walking anyway. If that's you, keep going. Because sometimes the most sacred vows you'll ever make are the ones you whisper to yourself. To stay honest, to stay kind, to never settle for half-truths, and to never again confuse love with loyalty to pain. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched something in your heart, if it reminded you that you're not alone, share it, tell me your thoughts below, or just whisper your own story into the night, because maybe somewhere out there, another woman is standing in her rain-soaked dress trying to find her strength again. And maybe your words will be the hand that helps her stand. Would you have walked down that aisle, or walked away like I did? Tell me in the comments, and remember, this is Auntie May reminding you that even when love betrays you, truth never will.